And welcome into the MLB Hot Stove Daily here at the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us late, very, very late on a Friday night, Saturday morning now for some of you out there. But there is a little bit of baseball news to get into. Of course, the Christmas break really does kind of dry things up on the news front, but we do get a couple of news items from the, I guess you'd call them just the Athletics now, signing Tyler Soderstrom to the longest deal in franchise history, or the biggest deal in franchise history up to this point, 7 years and change. We'll see if they end up getting the option year as well. It's a heck of an option at the end of that deal. We'll get into that here in just a moment. But the news of the day today is Edward Cabrera from the Miami Marlins might be getting closer to finally getting dealt. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe, and let's get into them. Let's begin with the Edward Cabrera market. Obviously, every team would love controllable, young starting pitching with multiple years ahead on their deal. Cabrera kind of fits that to a T. He's not a number one, but he certainly could be a decent number two, at least a number three in almost every single rotation out there in the entire game, with the exception of probably the Los Angeles Dodgers, who host a rotation of nothing but aces. But either way, Cabrera is a valuable asset in this trade market. We've been talking about the Marlins wanting to trade from their starting rotation depth for the better part of 2 years at this point. They were able to capitalize a little bit on it last year with Jesus Luzardo. Now this offseason, they're looking to possibly move on from Sandy Alcantara, Edward Cabrera, maybe even Ryan Weathers as well. Doesn't look like they're looking to move on from any of their prospects in the minor leagues or Yuri Perez, their what I would expect to be their ace on opening day. Now, as far as Cabrera's market, with as talented as a pitcher as he is, wouldn't be surprising to see him go to any one of the other teams out there in the entire league. However, the price is considerably high. So you have to consider who is looking for controllable starting pitching that would be able to pay the prospect cost to be able to get it done and would have the impetus to get this type of deal done. Are they a team in contention? Are they a team that's just on the periphery? Are they a team that's just looking for some competent starting pitching? Those are all factors you need to keep in mind. Now, Anthony, you mentioned in your message there, upside, if Miami Marlins are closing in on a trade with Eric Cabrera, who's the team that they're saying the trade is attached to? They haven't necessarily named one specific team, but it does sound like they're at least narrowing the field. With the trade of Shane Baz going to the Baltimore Orioles, basically takes off one team off the list for teams that might be able to bring in Edward Cabrera. Now, I still think the Orioles need more starting pitching, so I find it interesting that they've kind of bowed out here of this type of a trade. He would kind of fit the model of what they've really been looking for in starting pitching, as far as I'm concerned. But it sounds like they're looking for a free agency to kind of solve the rest of their pitching needs. The other team that's said to have bowed out of this race here is the Houston Astros. Mike Burrows was acquired in a trade the other day as well, kind of solving the need in the starting rotation. Now, of course, Houston could bring back Framber Valdez. That seemed as a non-starter at this point. The market around Framber Valdez has kind of gotten very interesting over the last, I would say, week and a half, 2 weeks, where it seems like the Houston Astros and other executives around the league have gotten a very distinct impression that Framber Valdez does not care about where he signs, that he wants the biggest dollar amount wherever he goes. So that's something to kind of keep an eye on as well. So as far as him going back to Houston, seems like that one's gone out the window. And as far as Cabrera, with them bringing in Burrows, sounds like they like their rotation options that they have. Would not be surprised to see them add some depth options, kind of 6th, 7th starter types that can be long relievers or guys that you stash in the minor leagues until the need arises. But it sounds like they're looking elsewhere for starting pitching. You take those two teams out of the equation, there's still a healthy number of teams that are going to be interested in him, obviously. But I would suspect with teams starting to bow out of the running here and prices being so high for free agent starting pitching and the market for starting pitching being so thin on the free agent side as far as guys that teams are actually targeting, that this trade could very well come down in the next couple of weeks here. With the Christmas break and New Year's and so forth, expect a very slow news day over the next couple of weeks here. But once we get after the first, I would expect news to come fast, very, very fast after that point. We have very few free agents that have signed so far. Before we got to the winter meetings, we have a nice little run of free agency, transactions getting done. The week of the winter meetings was essentially nothing. And then the last week before we got to Christmas, we finally started to see some of the names come off the board. Michael King and others. But Real Muto's kind of holding up the catching side of things. The biggest offensive pieces are still out there. Kyle Tucker, Bregman, Bellinger, all still out there that have to make their decisions. I would expect sooner than rather, they would rather make those deals sooner rather than later. So I'd expect a rather newsy post-January 1st. But as far as a closing in on a trade, I do think that they're kind of narrowing the field here. We mentioned the Rangers could be one of those teams. The kind of the what I'm sensing around the Texas Rangers that we thought they might spend a little bit more in free agency on a starting pitcher. They have roughly $30 to $40 million with which they can spend right now just to get to where last year's payroll was. Obviously, they want to trim payroll. They trimmed a little bit of, more than that by trading away Marcus Semien and kind of gave themselves a cushion there if they wanted to go after a Zach Gallen. They could certainly do so. Now, I wouldn't certainly rule them out on a Zach Gallen or another free agent starting pitcher, but it sounds like to me free agency might not be the way they're looking right now. Reading the tea leaves from reports from Jeff Wilson and Evan Grant tell me that they're looking more on the trade side of things, primarily to keep the cost down. They want to kind of keep that payroll as low as they possibly can. Chris Young is of the mindset that you can never have enough starting pitching, and Cabrera would certainly be a boost to this Rangers pitching staff. I would consider the Rangers as one of the teams that should be considered a front runner here for Edward Cabrera. Other teams, I would look at the Chicago Cubs. I'd look at the teams like the Milwaukee Brewers, who are looking for controllable starting pitching. They're looking to move Freddie Peralta, though, so until they move Peralta, I wouldn't expect a trade for a starting pitcher coming back as of yet. But the Cubs certainly need multiple starting pitchers. Imai, they're said to be one of the finalists there for. There's a couple other guys that I suspect them to have natural interest in as far as a short-term, low-cost option. But we've heard about them being in contention for Cabrera for years as well. The Yankees are looking at Imai. They lost on Michael King, obviously. They're still looking for more starting pitching, and they've been connected to Edward Cabrera for basically the last 3 years at this point. Do I think they're necessarily a front runner? No, but I wouldn't rule this one out until they get this deal done because of their continued interest in the player. So let us know, where do you think Edward Cabrera ultimately ends up? My vote is he probably ends up on a team like the Texas Rangers, so I'm going to go ahead and cast my vote for the Rangers to be the team that he ultimately ends up with. They have the prospects to be able to get the deal done, the pieces on the MLB side of things to get things done as well. They could construct a very compelling trade package for the Miami Marlins. They've come together on trades in the past, and his former manager, Skip Schumacher, the new manager of the Texas Rangers, is now the skipper there, obviously. And so bringing in somebody he's comfortable with in that starting rotation, you got to think makes a lot of sense there in Texas. So you guys know I'm a Rangers fan. Could be just the Rangers, coming through in me. But I think the Rangers make a lot of sense here, even more so than for a free agent like a Luis Arraez, who I still think they could sign, sure. But I think until they figure out how this infield is really going to be aligned, the roster flexibility, I think the chances of Luis Arraez signing in Texas are a little slimmer than they would be until they make those types of moves. Upside, where do you think the rumors are coming from exactly? That is more likely that Miami keeps Sandy till the deadline, but trades Edward this offseason. As far as where, I think it's more just the Miami Marlins just trying to boost the prices up here a little bit. They want to try to not sell so low on Sandy Alcantara. They still view him as a Cy Young type of pitcher, and I'm sure a few teams out there still do, but they want to get the return for a Cy Young caliber pitcher of Sandy Alcantara's caliber. Now, obviously, right now, they're not going to get that. They're going to have to sell low if they decide to trade him in this offseason. But I think they're trying to boost that value up and just see what interest they can really drum up. If they can get a legitimate offer here, I think they would get a deal done. But I don't think they'd necessarily just say, we're going to wait and just see, what we could possibly get at the deadline just for the heck of it. If they get a legitimate offer for him, I think they will flip him sooner rather than later. But I do think Cabrera is the one with a higher trade value and is more likely to be dealt. How much more likely? Your guess is as good as mine, but I'd say, 60-40. Cabrera being traded before Alcantara. But again, if you bowl him over, just like any other team, this deal could come together rather quickly. Manuel, welcome in. Do you think the Yanks are considering a trade for a starting pitcher, or are they going the free agent direction? I think they're trying to exhaust all their options in free agency first, not just on the free agent pitcher side, but also on the free agent hitter side as well. Remember, they're trying to bring back Bellinger. They've been in talks with Michael King. Obviously, they never even offered him a actual contract for him to even consider. So Imai is the next option they've been considered finalists for, loosely I should say, because it says there's still several teams still in the market for Imai. That deal is going to have to come pretty quickly here around the first of the year. Same thing with Okamoto for the international free agents. But back to the Yankees side of this, I do expect them to go more in the free agent direction to solve their needs. Sure, they have the prospect depth to get these deals done, and I think they will deal from that depth at some point this offseason, but they will do so after they resolve their issues through free agency first, and if they can't, they'll delve even deeper into the trade acquisition side of things this offseason. John, where did you hear about the Marlins Cabrera trade? Hearing more about teams being eliminated more than anything else, and as far as them kind of eliminating teams, that tells us with the prices being high for free agent starting pitchers and teams not necessarily be enamored with guys like Zach Gallen and others that are on this market, that they're looking more to the free agent side, or they're looking more to the trade side of things more than anything else, which leads you to believe players that are on the trade block that are starting pitchers like Cabrera, like Alcantara, Mitch Keller from the Pittsburgh Pirates, and several other starting pitchers who are on the block right now. Their prices certainly are high. On the position player side, Ketel Marte, Donovan, and others, their prices are obviously high as well. This free agent class doesn't necessarily have the depth that it has had in recent years. And with teams locking up their talent sooner and sooner, long-term deals for Fernando Tatis Jr., locking up almost all their young talent now, fewer and fewer top-end talented players are getting to free agency, which is why going for those controllable options is the more preferable option for these clubs. As far as a specific team, the teams that we mentioned earlier in the video have reached out to the Marlins in the past, with the Astros and the Orioles kind of bowing out over the last 48 hours in pursuit of him. It sounds like we're kind of whittling these teams down. The teams that we know have reached out in years past, the Rangers, the Cubs, the Yankees and the Red Sox to different varying levels, and the Blue Jays, I would say, kind of put those, take them out of the discussion as well. They've already solved their issues in their rotation, but they were another team that had reached out at one point. So I'd say those are the teams most likely. The Giants were another team to kind of mention as well because they're still looking to add more starting pitching, but it sounds like they might go the cheaper route in free agency to solve the back end of their rotation. Fast Nickel, you think the Mets are in the talks? I do think to some extent they are, but I think they're still looking more towards the free agency side of things, and also for Freddie Peralta. I think they're trying to get Freddie Peralta and Framber Valdez more than anything else. I think they need to get those two arms. I love Cabrera, but he's more of a number 2. I need a number 1 there in New York, and until they get it, Cabrera to me doesn't fit that mold as a number 1, but he can in short periods of time. But I'm not counting on him to take the ball in Game 1 of a World Series against the Dodgers and be able to shut him out. I don't think that he's that type of a pitcher. But he certainly, for a couple of games, could certainly put up some numbers that are similar to an ace. But I would rather be much more comfortable with a true number 1 at the top of the rotation. Freddie Peralta's done it in Milwaukee. We've seen Framber Valdez do it for the last couple of years down there in Houston, and I think that's the way the Mets are ultimately going to go. As far as the Mets being in talks for starting pitching like Edward Cabrera, if they're not in on the talks, shame on that GM, shame on that front office for not being in on that market. He's a very high-quality pitcher, and they need not 1, not 2, but probably 3 starters going into the year. They've also been in talks about acquiring Nick Pivetta from the Padres, possibly trading away their own starter and David Peterson as well. I don't think they'll trade Nolan McLean in one of these trades, but I do think the ask from the Padres of Jonah Tong is certainly something the Mets are considering, especially if they can get a Mason Miller and Pivetta stack and solve their issues both in the bullpen and in that starting rotation in one fell swoop. Paranormal, welcome in. Appreciate you joining us. What's the news on the Yankees and everything today in baseball? Any rumors, moves, or anything that happened today? Good to see you. Merry Christmas as well. Appreciate you joining us. Not too many news items. Like you said, there's very little that happens around Christmas. So, we're just getting kind of very small news items. For instance, the Boston Red Sox dominated a lot of the rumor mill today just because they were the only team that any reporter really had any new information on. And that was more of them kind of, what is life after the trade for Contreras looking like? What positions are they targeting? We already knew that they're still looking for an upgrade at second base. They're trying to solve what they're going to do over there at third. What are they going to do with this outfield glut out there with the 4 high-profile outfielders that they have? Are they going to go into the season with those guys? Are they peddle one of those for another starting pitcher? Lots of options for the Red Sox, obviously, but those are all the same storylines we've been talking about for a while now. Do they bring in Ketel Marte or do they prefer Brendan Donovan? Do they go free agency or do they just stick with Campbell? Lots of options here for the Red Sox, but again, because they're the only team that really put out any fresh news, I guess you could say, they kind of dominated the news cycle today. But to kind of answer the rest of it, any other rumors on the Yankees? Not too much. Nothing new anyway since Christmas anyway, but I would still say that they're looking at free agency more than anything else. Other news, of course, was Soderstrom getting the deal. In fact, we'll go ahead and move on to that one as well. The deal for Soderstrom, let me get the actual number here, make sure I get it right. 7 for 86, and also has a $45 million option if it's exercised. So that's a big option, but again, that's 7 years down the road. That might be legitimate value for Soderstrom. Now, to me, he was always a player that was out of position after they brought up Nick Kurtz. Now, they got to get that deal done. That would be a huge deal when they do get it. But, they're basically buying out his arbitration years and 1 year, I believe, of his free agency. So not too much of a payday here for him, but at least the certainty of the contract is what he's really getting here. Now, it's interesting for the A's that they're kind of keeping this team together when in years past, they were the team that always flipped all of their young players. Chapman, Donaldson, and all their other young, talented players. They're starting pitchers over the years. They peddle all those guys just when you really start to buy into this team. They trade them for prospects, whatever they can get, and kind of keep this thing rolling. I get it. They were in a small market or had to act like a small market team as the Oakland Athletics. They're now moving to Vegas, and they're acting a little bit differently than they have in, my lifetime at least. They're at least trying to lock up these guys. Now, do I expect them to stay on this roster long term? I don't. I still think Brent Rooker probably gets traded here before his value really goes down in the next couple of years as a first base DH only option pretty soon. Soderstrom also seen as a first baseman playing out of position in left field. For now, he's athletic enough to be able to hold down that spot, but I wonder long term if he's going to be the answer there, or do they pedal him as well in years 4, 5, 6 of this extension? So, but good on the A's for at least locking up these guys and having a good offensive team to go into their new digs there in Las Vegas in a couple of years. Now, as far as the A's, people are trying to peg them to be a wild card contender this year. Let's slow our roll on that one. I get their offense certainly could be one of the best in the game, but you tell me, which starting pitcher are you counting on to give him 30 starts? I'll wait. Which starting pitcher are you counting on having a sub-4 ERA? I'll wait. Which starting pitcher or pitcher in general are you counting out getting a high leverage out in any game this season? I'll wait again. They certainly have some options that they can utilize that have major league experience. They certainly have guys who have done it at one point or another. But nobody is proven in that athletics organization to really handle things on the pitching side, and they're not going to be a team in the wild card contention. Now, they might hang around until the end of August, but by no means at the end of September am I expecting the A's to be there in wild card position. They might be, 8, 10 games out at that point of the wild card, and that's because they just don't have the pitching. They traded away their elite closer in Mason Miller last year. Their starting pitching is not there, would be a nice way to put it. Completely devoid of top-end talent would be another way to put it, and very little coming from their minor league system as well. So we'll see what happens with the A's, but for me, locking up Soderstrom was a must at some point, but I do think this team is a little limited defensively with him being in left, and I don't think he's going to be a long-term left fielder there. I think he's young enough to hold it down. Well, he's still young enough and athletic enough to hold it down, but he should be a first baseman. He's going to be playing out of position here. And the A's, bigger picture here, need to get the Nick Kurtz deal done. Langeliers is in arbitration. I don't think they'll get him done. And then they have to continue to try to churn and get some more starting pitching, either via free agency, taking on bad contracts from other clubs, or see if they can draft and develop it. They've struggled with that recently. Not something they've struggled with in their past. We'll see if they can rediscover that formula to success. But when you're playing in a bandbox that is a AAA ballpark, it's going to be a tough ask for those starting pitchers or any pitcher on their team to have a good year next season. Do you see the Padres picking up, not sure who you're trying to say there, Eli. Do I see the Padres trying to get a Cabrera, I guess? They're in on some of these starting pitching trades, but they don't necessarily have the prospects to do anything there. Sir Centra, why, if Luis Arraez is such an excellent hitter, does he not stick to one organization? Because he's a very hard commodity to try to value in this market. He's, to me, kind of a unicorn in Major League Baseball right now. He is the Tony Gwynn in Major League Baseball. Tony, to me, had just a little bit more power. Arraez does not have that same power. But Gwynn was primarily known as a contact hitter, a foul line to foul line hitter. He might hit it in the gap. He might just hit for singles. That's what Luis Arraez is. He's also a guy that doesn't strike out a whole lot. Does get on base via the walk, although the walk rate is dropping a little bit from his career highs. So he's a bat that is not a common one you see in today's game. There are very few hitters. In fact, I'd say he's probably the only hitter that doesn't hit for power that plays as well as he does. So it's hard for him to really find an organization and stick to it because the organization doesn't know how to value him. You look at the Minnesota Twins; they were able to flip him and get a true number one, or at least a number two, depending on how you view Pablo Lopez in that trade. Obviously, you get the starting pitcher, much more valuable to that organization. But Miami was desperate for offense. They tried it. They tried to highly value him. Lopez, at the time of the trade, was seen as number 4 starter for the Miami Marlins. Goes to the Minnesota Twins and immediately takes over as their number 2, sometimes their number 1. He was fantastic for the Twins. The trade worked out for them really, really well. Miami, not so much. They basically took this Arraez experiment and said, hey, we'll go ahead and shuffle this on to San Diego and see if we can keep this thing going. He certainly did help their offense, but I think they realized they don't know how to value him either. Now we're on to the Padres, same thing. They don't know how to value him, especially when they already are paying Jake Cronenworth. So which team is going to step out and say, this is going to be our guy? And I don't think there's a team out there that's going to do that. I do think he's going to get a 2-year deal. I think he's going to get somewhere in the neighborhood of $24 to $30 million. I think he'll still do well. But when you think about the top-end players in Major League Baseball, they're paid for power. They're paid for their ability to impact the game in multiple ways. He's not a plus defender. He's not a speedster on the base paths. His ability is to get him on and get him over. Now, that's a valuable tool in the 1980s and 1990s, In today's game, that type of player doesn't really stick around in Major League Baseball very long, and Arraez is certainly the exception to that rule. So you guys tell me, where does he sign? I think he's a very valuable player in today's game, but he's a very hard player to really peg because he's such a unicorn in today's game. Do you see the Padres picking up first base or DH type? Okay, that makes more sense. I would say they're going to wait on that one until they move on from Jake Cronenworth. I think that's their preference right now. It's going to take some time, though, until these bigger deals get done. I think teams are going to be waiting for those big guys on free agency to really set the market, and then free agency will move a lot faster. Trade markets will really get going as we get amped up for spring training. But as far as them picking up a first base or DH option, I do think they will add one. I don't think it'll be a very expensive option. Think Marcell Ozuna type. Think kind of top end of that would be like a Paul Goldschmidt, but I'm not sure they could afford him. Bottom end would be a guy like Josh Bell, who signed a 1-year, $7 million deal with the Twins earlier this offseason. That level of free agent I could see them going for, but not a long-term deal. Certainly nothing overly expensive either. All right, let's try to catch up on a few more of these comments from you guys, and then we'll try to head out for the evening. We'll be live again tomorrow night. We'll start a lot earlier tomorrow. We'll be live around 9-ish tomorrow on Saturday to kind of recap the week that was Christmas and get ready for the post-January 1 market, which is going to get going very, very quickly. The longer this market stagnates, the more it favors the Jays, in my opinion. The more likely that Bo Bichette comes back on a shorter-term, cheaper deal, and Tucker goes down to $3 or $350 instead of $350 plus. Honestly, I don't think it helps you at all in Tucker as far as the numbers coming down. I still think the numbers are going to be there wherever he decides to sign, whenever he decides to sign. He is the top option. Those types of guys do not see their market drop. Now, if we're talking pre-COVID years, when we had Manny Machado and Bryce Harper, teams were still a little bit more reticent to try to sign those long-term deals. But I think with the talent that's fewer and farther between on the free agent block, you're not going to get a Manny Machado these days in free agency. You're not going to get a Bryce Harper in free agency anymore. The best you can do is a Kyle Tucker. That's the rare exception. Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge. Those are very rare type of players that are not going to be hitting free agency again, at least for the next 10 years. So you look at free agency over the next few years coming up, there's certainly going to be some targets, but nowhere to the level of Shohei Ohtani, nowhere to the level of Aaron Judge, and certainly not the depth that we're used to seeing in free agency periods in the past as well, which does, I think, have an impact on the winter meetings, but that's an argument for another day. But as far as Tucker's number coming down, I don't believe so. Bichette, I could believe. Just because there's not really anybody targeting a shortstop in this market. That's why he said he was open to playing third base and second base at the end of his tenure there in Toronto. Then said as he entered free agency, I want to be a shortstop. Now he's kind of backtracked on that, saying he's willing to play second and third. Tells you where his market really is. And we kind of talked about him being the Trevor Story of this free agency class. And I still think he's going to get a nice deal. But is it going to be the numbers that he was looking for if he had a great platform season? Hell no. He might be able to get a couple-year deal with a higher average annual value from a couple of teams out there. I still think he's going to try to sign the long-term money wherever he does end up going. But I would say for the Jays specifically on this, I think they're the heavy favorites for Kyle Tucker right now. I still think you're going to pay through the nose for him, but I do think you're very realistically going to sign him. Now, I still think they're more likely to sign a guy like Alex Bregman at this point, but I would not rule out a Bo Bichette or even to a lesser extent a Cody Bellinger. They are all in on any one of those options. We'll see who they ultimately sign, but I would say they sign at least Kyle Tucker. Jeff Passan believes they will sign at least 2 of the 3 of Bellinger, Bregman, and Tucker. To me, if you sign Tucker, I think Bregman is the perfect fit here. Kind of gives you the flexibility with Barger to play him in the outfield. What do you do with Santander at that point? After he had a tough year for his first year in Toronto, got to hope for some positive regression there. But lots to kind of consider there in Toronto. Larry, the Yankees have been boring. They need to make a move. Now, do you think they sign Imai? I think they're right there with the Cubs, but I do think there's a few other teams that should be taken into account here. Phillies and others looking for top-end starting pitching. Some of these teams that move in silence, like the Texas Rangers, could be a dark horse in there as well. John, when will Cashman start trading players? After free agency kind of starts solving itself. Once we get Bellinger signed, I think we could see some moves, some rather quick activity from Cashman, like we saw when Juan Soto signed with the Mets. They moved very quickly to get the rest of their deals done. They quickly pivoted to Fried. They quickly pivoted to the trade options of bringing in Bellinger. They brought in Goldschmidt. They moved quickly after their top option came off the board. So once their top option goes, expect the Yankees to move fairly quickly. Sir Centra, why isn't the world champion Dodgers logo not in your backdrop? It's just a stock photo that I found that I just kind of put back up there. But I agree, they should be on there. I think the larger photo, because you can kind of see the outline on the sides here, the larger photo actually has them, I believe, next to the Rockies. But the, kind of cuts it off on the edges there. But either way, appreciate you guys joining us this evening. Had just a couple of news items I wanted to get into. It's not a very newsy day. It's not going to be a very newsy week, but I am expecting at least one decent-sized transaction over the next couple of days. Teams and players are all pretty much still on holiday break right now. Christmas season with Tyler Soderstrom signing the deal on Christmas Day anyway for the 7-year, $86 million extension is the exception, not the rule. And I still expect them to be somewhat active as far as one move or two that might catch our eye. But we're going to get into a lot of trade talk this week. We're going to get a lot into some of the free agents that are left and how quickly the market is going to move once we hit January 1. But pitchers and catchers are, less than 2 months away at this point now. We should see a flurry of activity, especially on the relief pitching side and starting pitching side, sooner rather than later, especially with the WBC coming up as well. All right, appreciate you guys joining us. Stay safe out there. We'll be back live tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Hit that like, subscribe if you haven't already done so. Got about 30 of you guys in here. Got about 13 likes. Let's see if we can bump that up here before we head out for the evening. Thank you for the hearts in the chat. Really do appreciate that as well. If you want to find us on Facebook, Upside Sports Network as well, whenever we do go live, I'll start the video, then I'll post the link out there for you guys to find us on socials. So be sure to hit that like, subscribe, find us on our socials, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow around 9. Stay safe out there, everybody. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.